What is more terrifying? Losing a sister, or realizing she has begun to speak in your own voice? That question seemed to settle in the Dalton house long before the town began to whisper about it. Cleveland at the turn of the century breathed with the roar of carts, the hot air of furnaces, and talk of steel that could be bent into any shape. Henry Dalton, owner of the mills, shaped his fortune into a mansion on the hill. It stood flawless and respectable. Red brick, wide porch, tower windows, a carefully kept garden. To passers-by it was simply another monument to wealth, never a place for gossip. That was its first deception. After their parents' death, the house belonged to the daughters, Clara and Evelyn. People named them almost formally, Miss Dalton the elder, Miss Dalton the younger. Clara was tall, with a straight back and a rehearsed smile she wore like gloves in society. She managed accounts, wrote to suppliers, welcomed charity committees in the parlor. Evelyn was delicate, drawn to small details others ignored. A faded pattern on porcelain, a note trembling in someone's voice. She rarely argued but knew how to say no in a way that ended questions. Their closeness was unclear. They appeared together when etiquette required it. Church collections, university recitals, autumn charity drives. Clara spoke, Evelyn nodded. Evelyn watched the room, Clara the faces. They moved not alike, but correctly, one as hostess, the other as guest. In that contrast lay the order the town respected. Inside, the mansion held its own kind of order. The front hall smelled of polished wood. Portraits on white walls looked benign, and the guest room offered chairs set in perfect symmetry. If the house had a voice, it would have sounded like Clara's. Steady, politely weary, leaving no space for objection. Evelyn kept to the library, where the windows seemed deeper than outside, the air cooler, and the floor unusually silent. She would linger among old journals with faded engravings as though searching for a secret note left for her alone. The servants, chosen by Clara, were discreet. 2 kitchen maids, a boy for errands, a gardener, a laundress. They were paid well, and so few rumors escaped. The ones that did were mild. Miss Evelyn feels unwell in spring. Miss Clara prefers letters to visits. The house is always cool. Respectability is the best disguise. It doesn't hide secrets. It makes them unnecessary. And yet something lingered there. Not fear, not chill, but a hidden seam, as though the fabric of life was stitched slightly askew. In the parlor whispers fell silent too quickly. In the library footsteps echoed wrong. In the tower the air felt heavy though the windows stood open. Guests would find themselves choosing not any chair but one chair, as if led without being asked. Evelyn was still seen around town. At the apothecary for lemon balm, at a music shop, in the hospital with fruit for charity. She always thanked with her eyes before her lips and slipped away early from conversation. "I tire faster than I'd like," she once confessed. Clara shielded her quietly, limiting visits, measuring her days. Nothing seemed strange in that. Families have their ways of protecting their own. The town accepted it as it accepts weather, warm for some, damp for others, but not worth arguing. If anyone suspected a hidden story behind the hilltop mansion, life itself seemed to answer them. Days turned, telegrams came from the mills, baskets went to church drives. No cracks on the facade, no weeds on the paths, no gaps in the schedule. Only one detail returned again and again to visitors' memory. In the front hall, between a mirror and the parlor door, hung a watercolor portrait. 2 girls in identical white dresses holding hands by a lake. One looked slightly aside, the other straight at the viewer. Both had the same dimples. The artist had likely meant to show sisterhood. Instead it left an unsettling doubt. Which was elder, which younger, or was it truly 2, and not the same child painted twice? Respectability doesn't erase mysteries. Teaches them patience. In the Dalton house everything stood as it should, like a shop display. Yet the eye always strayed back, checking if something had shifted. And in those moments a thought crept in, the one that begins everything. If 2 women live so close that one knows when the other will breathe, where does I end and you begin? And how thin can that line grow before it vanishes like glass in a child's portrait frame? The Dalton mansion was the pride of the street. Red brick, a tower draped in ivy, a neatly trimmed garden. It seemed the town itself held it up as an example. Yet anyone who lingered inside for more than a few minutes felt something unsettling. As if the walls shifted slightly, in rhythm with a human breath. The corridors did not match the outer walls. Sometimes a hallway led to a door that opened onto solid brick. The tower windows looked tall from outside, but inside they admitted only a thin, angled light, more shadow than day. Even the staircases creaked strangely. Not the dry groan of wood, but a damp, almost living sound. Servants, whom Clara replaced every half-year, rarely stayed long. One maid, Nancy, left abruptly, saying only, "There aren't just two sisters in that house." Others were silent, yet whispers spread. Muffled conversations behind closed doors, followed by only one of the sisters emerging. The townsfolk laughed it off. Shy women, fanciful minds. But rumors gathered. The laundress said she always received two identical dresses to wash, as if each sister had a double. The gardener swore he once saw a woman's silhouette on the veranda, and an instant later, the same silhouette at the library window. Officially, nothing was wrong. Two sisters in their wealthy home, upholding the family name. But to anyone who had stepped across the threshold, the mansion did not seem to shelter people. It seemed to shelter reflections. And those reflections, with each passing month, grew more alike. Dr. Samuel Whitford first came to the Dalton house in late autumn, summoned by a hurried note in Clara's neat, angular handwriting. She explained her sister was suffering from nervous exhaustion and would not allow herself rest. The physician knew the family name well. Dalton money had paid for hospital wings and church roofs. To refuse their call would have been unthinkable. Yet as his carriage rattled up the hill, he felt the strange unease he had known as a boy walking past the mansion, an awareness of being watched from windows where no curtain stirred. Clara met him in the front hall, dressed in dark silk, perfectly composed. "Evelyn is delicate," she said at once, "too fragile to be disturbed." She guided him toward the library rather than upstairs, insisting she could describe her sister's condition in detail. And indeed, she did. Pulse irregular, appetite poor, nights restless, even the exact hour Evelyn most often woke. Her precision was remarkable, almost clinical. When Whitford asked to see the patient, Clara's smile tightened. "My sister grows anxious in company. It would do more harm than good. I beg you to trust me." He left that evening unsettled. A physician cannot prescribe on words alone, and yet Clara had spoken with such certainty that he found himself writing out a tonic as if he had already taken Evelyn's pulse. Weeks passed, and the visits repeated. Each time he came, Clara met him, never Evelyn. Sometimes, muffled behind closed doors, he thought he heard movement, footsteps halting, as though someone paused to listen at the wall. Once, as he set down his bag, a faint voice drifted from the upper landing. A woman's voice, barely above a whisper, repeating a single word he could not quite catch. Clara spoke louder in that moment, as if to cover the sound. In December, he insisted more firmly, "I must see Miss Evelyn myself." Clara's reply was smooth, practiced. "She is sleeping. She begs for peace. I will not have her agitated." And yet as she spoke, the old staircase groaned above them, slow and deliberate, as though carrying weight. On his last visit before Christmas, Whitford brought a small vial of sedative. Clara received it eagerly, thanking him with a kind of relief that felt theatrical. As he turned to go, he glanced toward the parlor mirror. For an instant, in the reflection, he thought he saw two women standing side by side, both with Clara's sharp jawline, both with Evelyn's pale eyes. He spun around. Only Clara stood there, smiling calmly, the vial clutched in her hand. Whitford left with his skin prickling, an unfamiliar dread crawling along his ribs. He wrote in his notes later that night, "The Dalton household requires attention. The elder sister is precise to the point of mimicry. The younger is absent, yet her presence is felt everywhere. There is sickness here, but I cannot name whose it is." He never returned. The Daltons were not always steel barons. A generation earlier, before furnaces and railroads, the name had been tied to books, imported volumes of philosophy and strange, foreign tracts that Henry Dalton's father kept in locked cabinets. Old neighbors recalled evenings when the parlor windows glowed long after midnight. The elder Dalton bent over manuscripts with ink-stained fingers, muttering as though repeating lessons to an unseen tutor. When Henry inherited, he turned away from the occult interests of his father and built his fortune in iron. Yet the house on the hill carried traces of that earlier obsession. The library shelves sagged under translations of German mystics, treatises on transference of spirit, pamphlets about mesmerism. Few in town had ever seen the books, but the air of them seemed to cling to the family like a rumor that would not die. Clara treated the past with cool disdain. "My grandfather wasted his nights on nonsense," she once told a church deacon. "We have no need for shadows when steel gives us light." Evelyn, however, was different. She was often seen in the library, hands resting on cracked spines, eyes wandering across marginal notes left in an old, impatient hand. "He believed identity could be bent," she told a visiting cousin. "The way metal bends when heated, but what if the fire never goes out?" The cousin remembered the remark years later with a shudder. Town gossip added its own embroidery. Their mother, Elizabeth, had died young, her decline sudden and unexplainable. Some whispered madness, others a wasting sickness. One servant swore the lady had spent her final months murmuring into mirrors, as if pleading with her own reflection to answer back. The memory unsettled those who knew, because Evelyn had inherited her mother's soft voice, and, perhaps, her tendency to linger too long before the glass. By the winter of 1892, those who met the sisters began to notice subtler things. Clara and Evelyn no longer seemed complementary. They seemed convergent. Clara's clipped tone softened. Evelyn's hesitant manner grew sharper. At a church luncheon, both women reached for a cup at the same instant, withdrawing their hands in mirrored gestures, smiling the same uneasy smile. "Two halves of one thought," Reverend Pritchard remarked afterward, though he did not mean it kindly. Whispers gathered that the sisters were too close, that something in the Dalton house was teaching them to blur. A shopkeeper claimed he heard Evelyn ask for medicine in Clara's exact voice. A guest at a supper table swore she lost track of which sister was speaking. Every phrase seemed to echo, every glance already answered. Respectability still held. Their name was still written on church lists and charity drives. But behind closed doors, in the heavy silence of the mansion, something was knitting them together. Whether by blood, by choice, or by the old shadows of their grandfather's books, no one could yet say. And so the question deepened, unspoken but alive in every whisper. How long can two souls remain separate when one house, one history, and perhaps one mirror insists they are the same? The first week of March brought weather that unsettled even hardened steelworkers. The air turned metallic, humming before each strike of lightning. On the seventh night, thunder rolled like iron across the river, and the mansion on the hill stood in silhouette against the storm. Neighbors later agreed on one thing. The cries came during the heaviest downpour, rising above the roar of rain. Not cries of alarm, but something worse, drawn out, pleading, like the sound of someone bargaining for their own name. Children woken by the storm claimed they heard a woman calling, "Stop!" again and again. Parents hushed them, but the unease spread through the street. By morning, stories swelled. A farmer swore he had seen a figure in white moving behind a tower window, pacing in a space that, by architectural plans, was only for storage. A seamstress reported she smelled smoke drifting from the chimneys, bitter and acrid, though no fire burned in the town that night. The town constable, pressed by frightened neighbors, climbed the hill with a young deputy. They found the front gate unlatched, rain pooling in the gravel. The door to the house stood slightly open, as if waiting. Inside, the air smelled sharp, mixed with medicine and damp plaster. Clara received them in the parlor, perfectly composed, as if no storm had passed. She explained the cries as superstition. Evelyn had been restless, a window left open, the wind catching the shutters. "Old houses make noises," she said smoothly. "And frightened ears invent voices." The deputy shifted uneasily. He had noticed the parlor door, its paint chipped in narrow grooves. Not random scratches. Parallel, desperate, as though fingernails had raked the wood again and again. Clara saw his gaze, laid a hand over the marks, and smiled in a way that ended questions. Evelyn did not appear. Clara insisted she was sleeping upstairs. "You may call again tomorrow," she said, her tone as firm as iron bars. The constable, unwilling to press against the weight of Dalton influence, nodded. The men left, though the deputy looked back once more at the tower windows. He thought he saw the curtains stir, but if anyone stood there, the storm swallowed them whole. That week the house grew noisier, though never when anyone but neighbors listened. Hammering echoed faintly at night, as if boards were being shifted above the third floor. Deliveries arrived at odd hours. Lumber, plaster, and crates too heavy for the errand boy to move without help. Clara explained it away with ease, repairs from winter damage. But the workers she hired left quickly, pale and silent, refusing to speak of what they had seen. By mid-March, no one in the street doubted that something in the Dalton mansion was wrong. But wrong in what way, no one could agree. Was Evelyn gravely ill, her cries carried by the wind? Or was it Clara's voice echoing, rehearsing in empty rooms? The only certainty was that each storm brought more whispers, and each whisper pushed the sisters further from ordinary life. The house, once the pride of the hill, now stood like a sealed chest no one dared open. And inside, something beat against the lid, begging for air. By April, Evelyn Dalton no longer appeared at all. No gentle nods at the apothecary, no fleeting presence at charity halls, not even a glimpse through the lace curtains of the library windows. At first, townsfolk assumed her health had worsened. Clara herself explained it that way. "My sister is resting. She requires quiet." But rest became absence, and absence became something harder to excuse. Invitations sent to Evelyn were returned with Clara's tidy handwriting, thanking politely but declining. When the Ladies' Aid Society asked if Evelyn might contribute a reading at the spring benefit, Clara smiled and said, "She has gone away for her recovery. A change of air will cure her." Gone away. The words should have settled the matter, but no one could discover where she had gone. No carriage driver recalled taking Evelyn to the station. No ticket had been purchased under her name. The post office held no forwarding address. Even her gowns remained in the laundry, pressed and waiting, as if their owner might step into them tomorrow. Attention thickened around the house. The gardener, usually tight-lipped, muttered one evening at the tavern that he had carried trays upstairs for weeks, setting them before a locked door. He swore he heard movement behind it, sometimes sobbing, sometimes laughter, but the food was never touched. The man refused to return the next day. Children, emboldened by stories, lingered near the gates. They claimed to see a pale figure drifting through the upper windows, hair unbound, eyes too large for the face. Their parents dismissed it as fancy, yet kept them indoors after dusk. Clara maintained her composure in public, if not her warmth. Where once she had been brisk and polite, she was now sharp, her sentences clipped, her eyes cold as polished steel. At church she knelt longer than others, lips moving silently as though reciting a catechism of her own making. When asked about Evelyn, her replies grew shorter each week. "She is abroad. She is better left to rest." Finally, only, "She is not to be spoken of." Whispers filled the void her answers left. Some believed Evelyn had died quietly in her bed and Clara concealed it to protect the family name. Others said she had been sent away to an asylum in another state, her mind broken by some inherited affliction. A few spoke more darkly still, that Evelyn had not gone anywhere at all, but was kept within the mansion, unseen, her voice the one that cried during storms. None could prove a thing. The Dalton fortune insulated Clara from questions, and the mansion itself stood like a sealed box, its windows reflecting only sky. Yet in the town below, a certainty spread, whispered in shops and on porches. There was only one sister now, and even she did not seem entirely herself. Respectability held the doors shut. But behind them, the silence was heavier than any rumor, and more frightening than any scream. Dr. Whitford could not let the matter rest. Though months had passed since his last official visit, the image in the mirror, the twin reflection, clung to his thoughts like a fever. At last, under the pretense of delivering new medicine, he returned to the Dalton mansion. Clara met him at the door, cool as ever. Evelyn, she claimed, was improving by degrees. Yet her phrasing was strange. She grows nearer to herself each day. Whitford did not understand, but the words unsettled him more than any report of fever or cough. When he asked again to see the younger sister, Clara's eyes hardened. She rests upstairs. Disturbance would undo all my care. And yet, even as she spoke, the doctor thought he heard something drift down from above. A frail voice repeating the same line, over and over. He strained to catch it, but the words tangled with the creak of beams. Only the rhythm remained, steady as prayer. Days later, a clerk from the apothecary confided in Whitford. The Dalton account had grown strange. Large orders of laudanum, chloral hydrate, and ether. Rolls of bandages, plaster by the barrel. Enough to set up a ward, the clerk whispered. Yet only one patient in that house. When Whitford pressed him, the man paled. Not one patient, sir. Two. The bills name them both. The doctor returned once more, this time uninvited. He found the house too quiet, its silence not natural but engineered, as if all sound had been smothered. Passing the parlor, he saw the door scarred again. Fresh grooves gouged deep, lower this time, as though made by someone on their knees. Clara appeared suddenly behind him, holding a lamp. Her face was calm, but the light trembled in her hand. My sister is safe, she said. Safer than she has ever been. Her smile was too tight, her shadow against the wall too tall. That night Whitford wrote in his private journal. The Dalton household is unwell, though I cannot name the malady. Miss Clara grows more precise in her speech, more rehearsed. Miss Evelyn is invisible, yet her presence presses through the walls. There is a ritual here, whether medical or darker I cannot yet decide. But I fear the patient is not the only one under treatment. By summer, even the neighbors noticed unusual deliveries at odd hours. Crates carried in by men who refused to meet the eye. The clatter of hammering in the tower, though no repairs were ever visible outside. A neighbor swore she heard voices one night. Two women speaking in unison. The same words repeated twice, half a breath apart. The mansion loomed above the street like a stage, its curtains drawn tight, its actors unseen. And behind those curtains, something was being prepared, shaped, rehearsed, until the day it would step out wearing a face the town thought it already knew. It was the storm of September that finally broke the silence. Lightning struck the hill with a violence that shook the glass in the town below. Flames leapt suddenly from the Dalton mansion's roof, licking up through the tower like a torch. By the time the fire brigade reached the gates, the upper floors were already engulfed. Clara was found in the garden, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face. She was laughing, low, uneven, as if at a private joke. When the captain asked where her sister was, she said only, "Evelyn is exactly where she has always been." The men pressed into the burning house. The lower floors smoldered, but it was the tower that resisted, fire biting at it yet refusing to consume. When part of the roof collapsed, it revealed what should not have existed. A chamber hidden behind false walls, a room never listed in the architect's plans. Inside, through the smoke, they saw it. A crude living space, blackened by soot but unmistakable. A narrow bed chained to the floor, a mirror shattered in its frame. On the walls, scratches gouged so deep the wood splintered, some darkened with what looked like blood. And on a small table, blackened papers still smoldered, words dissolving into ash. One phrase remained legible before the fire ate it whole. I am Clara. I am Evelyn. We are one. The firefighters swore later that they saw more than smoke in that room. One claimed he glimpsed two figures standing side by side in the mirror shards. though only one body lay before the bed. Another whispered he heard breathing in the corner long after the flames should have suffocated all sound. When the blaze at last surrendered, the chamber was nothing but rubble. Yet fragments told enough. 2 identical gowns, scorched but distinct in size, hairbrushes holding the same auburn strands cut to different lengths. A notebook, its pages charred at the edges, filled with handwriting that began in one style and ended in another. Dr. Whitford, summoned to examine what remained, wrote privately. The body recovered shows signs of confinement, of alteration. Bones broken and healed, features adjusted. I cannot tell whether I looked upon Clara or Evelyn. Perhaps I looked upon both. By dawn the mansion was a husk, its tower gutted, its windows staring hollow over the city. Clara Dalton was gone, vanished between the garden and the morning light. Some swore they saw her walking barefoot down the hill as the fire still raged, clothes dripping with rain, face turned upward as if listening for a voice only she could hear. The town buried the fire quickly, too quickly. Official reports spoke of faulty wiring, an accident. The hidden room was omitted entirely. Yet among the men who fought the flames, silence never settled. They carried the memory of the scratches, the mirror, and that final unbearable question. Had there ever truly been 2 sisters, or had the house on the hill labored all those years to make them one? By spring of the following year, the Dalton mansion was gone. The charred beams had been hauled away, the blackened stones toppled and buried. Where the house once stood, the town planted grass and saplings, eager to erase the sight of ruin from its skyline. Respectability demanded forgetting, but forgetting never held. Children were the first to return. They dared each other to run across the patch of ground where the tower had once risen. More than one tripped over bricks still warm in the earth, though the fire had long died. They whispered that when you stood in the center, the air grew heavier, as if someone breathed beside you. Some came home with scratches on their arms, thin as fingernail marks. Parents scolded them, but kept them indoors after dusk. Adults, too, began to notice. Grass refused to grow in one square of soil, a rectangle as neat as any foundation stone. In summer, when the park bloomed, that patch remained barren, the dirt pale and dry. Gardeners dug deep, expecting rock, but found only ashes mixed with small fragments of glass, warped as if by heat. The town tried to speak of other things, yet stories slipped back into circulation. The laundress who had once served the sisters told her niece she had seen a ledger survive the fire. In it, 2 signatures repeated again and again, Clara Dalton, Evelyn Dalton, but the handwriting converged until the names were indistinguishable. The ledger vanished soon after, tucked away by officials who insisted it was nothing more than smoke damage. At night, passers-by swore the park did not sound empty. A woman's laugh sometimes carried across the grass, brittle as broken glass. Once, during a thunderstorm, a constable heard a voice calling a single name, Clara, from the darkness above where no building stood. He left the force within the month. There were discoveries too, small and unsettling. A boy digging for marbles found a silver thimble, scorched black, initials worn away. Workmen laying a water line uncovered a tiny box buried in the earth. Inside lay strands of auburn hair, tied with 2 ribbons, their colors faded but distinct. The box was sent to the town clerk's office and promptly disappeared from record. Some spoke of seeing a figure at the park's edge, tall and spare, with hair streaked gray. She never lingered, vanishing into the crowd before anyone could follow. Witnesses argued over her face. Some swore she looked like Clara, others, Evelyn. Most disturbing were those who insisted she looked like both at once. Respectability demanded the fire remain an accident, the mansion a memory, the sisters a closed chapter. But the ground refused such neatness. Beneath the grass, something endured. And those who passed too close at night knew it. The Dalton house had not burned away. It had only shed its walls, leaving its secret to breathe freely in the open air. Decades passed, yet the hill never freed itself from the Dalton name. The mansion was gone, the park tidy and green, but whispers clung like ivy. Scholars came with notebooks, collectors with questions, and each left with fewer answers than before. In 1919, a gravestone was discovered in a cemetery 2 counties away. The inscription read, Margaret Eleanor Smith, 1861 to 1920. She found herself at last. The name matched no town record. The caretaker described the woman who had arranged the burial. Tall, auburn-haired, streaked with gray, eyes mismatched in color. She had spoken with cultured diction, paid in cash, and left no address. Whether she was Clara, Evelyn, or both was never resolved. Letters surfaced too. One, sealed into a wall in Portsmouth, bore the signature C.D. and spoke of a procedure completed, but imperfect. Another, found in a private collection, repeated a phrase like a chant. The vessel must be emptied before it may be filled. The handwriting shifted halfway down the page, as though written by 2 hands struggling for dominance. The town tried to smother such findings. Newspapers erased references, archives misplaced documents. Yet the past resisted burial. Children grew up telling each other that on storm nights, voices drifted over the park. 2 women speaking in unison. Words indistinct, laughter doubled. Some swore they saw a reflection in puddles after rain. Not their own face, but a pair of pale eyes watching from behind the water. By the 1950s, historians called it folklore. By the 1970s, ghost hunters set their cameras in the grass, claiming to record whispers. One tape carried a single sentence, repeated faintly, breathless and breaking. We are the same now. The park remains ordinary by day. Families stroll, dogs run, children chase kites. But when the sky darkens and thunder gathers over the river, even the boldest quicken their pace past the barren patch of earth where nothing grows. They do not linger near the place where the tower once stood. The question has never been answered. Were there truly 2 sisters? Did one devour the other? Or did both dissolve into something neither Holy Clara nor Holy Evelyn? Perhaps the fire destroyed them. Perhaps it set them free. What endures is the unease, the sense that the Dalton house did not vanish but only shed its disguise, leaving behind echoes too sharp to fade. On storm nights, when lightning splits the sky and rain hammers the earth, those echoes call from the emptiness above the park. 2 voices, braided into one. 2 souls that refused to remain separate. And if you listen too long, you may find yourself wondering which voice is yours, and who, in the dark, is learning to speak it.